Welcome back to another episode of Ed Circuit Author Chats. It's my pleasure today to speak with another first-time author, Ryan Bani Tahmaseb, whose book, The 21st Century School Library, is available from John Catt Educational. Ryan is the Director of Library Services at the Meadowbrook School in Weston, Massachusetts, and prior to authoring his new book, he has also honed his writing skills as a contributor to Edutopia and Education Week, and he also writes short fiction and poetry with work appearing in journals such as the Carolina Quarterly. He's done quite a bit of writing, but we're really excited to introduce his first book here. Ryan, welcome to Author Chats.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
So Ryan, I think let's jump right in here. One of the things that is so, I think, critical and core to the book here is that you really write about libraries as being the hub of innovation in our 21st century schools. And a lot of that being the result of transformation of the library itself and the role of the school librarian in particular over the past couple of decades. And so how did the library come to be the source of innovative practices?
Well, first I'd like to say, I don't think we're the only ones being innovative, but obviously the lens of this book is that we are a great place for innovation in schools. And I think that's for several reasons. First and foremost, I think we work with all grade levels and teachers across subject matters. So we see a lot. And so we have to kind of be aware of best teaching practices. We're in the classroom seeing different kinds of lessons and units. And so we really get a sense of what's going on, generally speaking, in our particular schools. And just by the nature of being in those classrooms and working with different kinds of students, we need to be adaptable, flexible, et cetera. So I think innovation comes from that. I also think since the internet, became a thing, we've had to address multiple literacies in the schools, not just textual literacy, like I write about in various places in the book too. So there are other literacies that have become important in schools with the dawn of the internet. And so I think that has put us in a place where we are able to teach these crucial literacies and the skills associated with them.
And of course, you're correct to say, right, it's not the only hub of innovation, but it is really a location that's centralized. Everybody has access to, right? There's a lot of opportunity there to develop new practices that can benefit all the other faculty within the school, all the students. I mean, from the conversations, of course, you have your perspective within your own school, but from your conversations in the field, others you talk to for the book, others you speak with just, on an otherwise professional basis. Do you feel that most kind of teachers and administrators understand the ways that they're able to utilize the librarian as a resource to, I think, both indicate and implement innovative approaches? I'm sure there's of course, there's going to be a spectrum there, right? Some teachers who see that librarian as really their best friend, others who may just not really know that there is all these things they could take advantage of.
Yeah, such a great question. I think generally speaking, no, there's not a solid understanding in many places of what the library and librarian can do in schools. And that's kind of the inspiration for the book, really, because it's interesting. I wrote it directly to teachers and administrators. And I think just talking to the folks here and there, I think that has gotten kind of misunderstood a bit or lost. That it's not a book written for other librarians, other school librarians. It's really to help administrators and teachers better understand that school librarians are not sitting around guarding books all day and shushing all who enter, which is this kind of antiquated idea of school librarians that I think weirdly still is out there for a lot of people. The profession has been a lot more dynamic than that for some time and continues to evolve. And so that's what I wanted to look at with this book.
Someone like myself, right? I don't have children that are old enough yet to be in schools with libraries. So I haven't been in a school library myself since I was a student. But even for our educators who are working in districts, I mean, I would imagine that there are many, particularly administrators, maybe at the district level, maybe even those who are in a role that is somewhat structured around innovation, whether in the curriculum or whether in education technology or otherwise, that maybe it's been a while since they were in some of these libraries to kind of see what's happening now versus what was happening 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I mean, do you think there is maybe a benefit to having folks have more routine visits, to kind of come and see what's happening, because things are evolving so quickly and there's so many new things happening that could become, here's something we can scale, or here's something we might want to get more teachers involved with.
Absolutely. And this year for educators has been so hard. And last year was hard too. And the year before that, this is our third school year affected by COVID. And it's still, while things are, a little bit closer to quote unquote normal right now, in a lot of places, including my school, COVID still dictates a lot. And so teachers are absolutely overwhelmed right now. And I think this book could be a good resource for teachers to say, hey, these are the ways that the librarian can actually help me out, make my life a little bit easier. Not that we're going to do their work for them, but I think if teachers are willing to put in a little bit of time on the front end to have conversations with the librarian about what they're doing, or what kind of projects or units or assessments they have coming up, I think that partnership can actually be really invigorating in a time where the profession feels really overwhelming and exhausting for people.
And so, when we think about what those partnerships can look like, there's countless, right? Countless different examples of the types of initiatives, types of projects and work. And when we think about the word quote unquote innovation in education, we're talking about here is the library being a place where that innovation takes place. And frequently that term is thought of as synonymous with technology. And, of course, in the 21st century, that's where a lot of innovative approaches are taking place, but that's not necessarily the case. It might not even be the case most of the time. So in fact, you share a number of examples in the book, librarians you've spoken to, those who are innovating in curriculum content and instructional approaches, in other approaches around inclusivity and different things to engage students in more effective ways. Can you kind of, talk to our listeners a little bit about a couple of your favorite examples of librarian-led initiatives, but specifically, and I'm sure they're all more or less favorites, but I'm thinking specifically about those who, on the surface, it may not be intuitive when we say innovation, this is what we're talking about, right? But there are things there that really are innovative because they're introducing new ideas, or they're really improving upon things. So I would love to allow you to kind of share some of those examples, because I think it'll really provide context for the type of work that's happening.
Yeah, sure. I think, well, first of all, for me, the word innovation, I think the best definition or understanding of what innovation is exactly, for me, that I read years ago, and I can't remember exactly where it's from, but it's to do something new and different. And so that's kind of the lens through which I think of innovation, for starters. But you're right. There are so many good examples throughout the book of school librarians specifically being innovative. Those I interviewed for the book. I point to some specific articles in School Library Journal where librarians are featured, and there's a kind of an exploration of projects that they've done that have been innovative. But if I had to select a few, I guess one of the first people I talked to was Meg Allison, a librarian at a public school up in Vermont. And she has she partners with teachers. So I think the collaboration part is key right there. She partners with teachers, I think in various subject areas, to create guidebooks for local mountains. So the students will research a particular mountain nearby, and then use Canva and various other digital tools to create these actually accurate guidebooks. And then they share those with a local Vermont agency who actually publishes them, and they're actually used out in the real world. So, right there, you have the collaboration with classroom teachers, you have this innovation creation of something that is actually going to be used in the real world. So you have the real world connection, the kind of project that also feels really valuable to students and for teachers too. Like, we're not just, we're doing something that has outcomes that extend beyond the school. And then the other example that comes to mind is Dr. Krista Wells, who has this conference she started, or I guess it's called an unconference, called EdCamp Urban, I believe. And the essence of that is teachers kind of congregate from urban public schools typically, and they come together and create little conferences on the spot based on areas of expertise. So there's no real plan going in. but it's more of like, what do we want to talk about today? What's on our minds? And let me share this thing with my colleagues. And I think it's such a librarian thing to do, because clearly she's seen this need, or she's participated in so many conferences before that were, making an educated guess here that were not super valuable to her or, her colleagues' time. And so like she went out and created this new unconference that, from what I understand, has been quite successful. So, all based on principles of, and that in itself, the actual creation of that unconference is an innovation too. So I think it's really cool.
Those are great examples and perfect opportunities for those thoughtful approaches, I think, that make these ideas take hold and grow and gain engagement, is because you're able to demonstrate either there's a specific problem we're solving, right? This is the way we've traditionally done PD or whatever, and we know that there's all these reasons why people have issues with it, or this is the way we've traditionally done instruction or student engagement or a certain subject area, and here's why this is not, quote unquote, innovation for the sake of innovation, but it actually is aligned to some of our authentic objectives and the things we all want. And it really, I mean, I could see the benefit, right, of having that resource with school librarians leading these things, because there's, I don't know, I see the ability that you would be doing these things not because you have to, but because you see the opportunity, right? It's not necessarily that it's been mandated. Well, this person has to come up with some new approach, or they have to do this this unconference, right? So, okay, well, they're going to come up with something and they'll do their best, but they have to do it regardless, right? That you have that built-in authenticity around it, which is really critical, because otherwise it's not going to go anywhere. Nobody's going to be able to commit to it.
And I think, absolutely. And I think a lot of us are former classroom teachers too. So we have that hat or that lens as well. And so we know that we know how to make ourselves valuable, because we know what's unvaluable to teachers. We know what, it feels like a waste of time. We know what is going to be a drag, extra work. And so we're really looking to truly partner with teachers and even administrators, as I mentioned earlier, to, help do really great things in schools, to help students enjoy their classes more, to help students perform better, to improve literacy skills, multiple literacy skills, etc.
Yeah, and I think, you thought about doing great things for students really connects into part of what was shared in the foreword to the book. So it was written by, I would say, educator, author, blogger Michelle Haken, somebody I've had the pleasure to collaborate with on a number of occasions. And so
really cool
that she wrote the foreword, and she really shared this perspective. To build a better world, we need to have access to information, knowledge, and ideas, so young people are literate in all facets of literacy. And you've referred to multiple literacies a couple of times, and we'll certainly talk a little bit more about that. But I kind of wanted to start with, in this digital world in which we can become often overwhelmed by information without necessarily becoming informed. Right? I mean, when I hear information, knowledge, and ideas, the knowledge really stands out to me, because I think that really indicates the necessary role of the educator, the teacher, the school librarian, the expert on the subject matter, to say, all right, I'm balancing my dual objectives here to introduce students to as much information as possible, but also provide that guidance, context, parameters for understanding what this information means, critical thinking, evaluation, right? All those things, to say that just quote unquote information is not, that's not the end of the journey. It's understanding where that came from. Of course, we think about this a lot of times in the context of history, right? Because you have to understand the context of the times to know why was this thing written the way it was. That could come up in literature, but it comes up everywhere. How do you approach that balance of saying, okay, great, here's here's the library, here's the internet, right? Everything you want and anything you want is there. You can access it. But also, like, my role here is I have some expertise, right? So I
Yeah.
want to make sure that you're actually engaging with and understanding it. It's not about restricting your access. It's about enhancing it so that you really come away with some knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, such an important and such a great question. I think for me, it starts with the fact that I've learned and I'm still learning to meet students where they're at. And so my first 7 or 8 years as an educator, I was a middle school English teacher. So I worked exclusively with 6th, 7th, 8th grade students. And then when I, went back to school and then became a school librarian, I started working with students as young as 1st and 2nd grade. And so I've had to learn over the years to kind of tailor my lessons, my objectives to where students are developmentally, and part of that's having conversations with teachers, part of that's learning from experience. But all that's to say, like, once I have an understanding of what the students need, then I see my job as teaching a specific skill or tool, giving students time to practice that specific skill or tool, and then maybe even having the students have opportunities either in that lesson or in future lessons to teach each other that skill. And so I keep, yes, I want to expose them to as much as possible and show them lots of resources, but I think it has to be within this kind of atmosphere of explicit teaching and practice and support while they practice, and then give them an opportunity, if possible, later to become teachers themselves. And so, again, as long as there's this kind of ecosystem or atmosphere of that's controlled by the teacher, again, within specific lessons or mini lessons, then I think the opportunities are endless for showing them all sorts of different resources online. So, like, for example, I just introduced some of our 3rd grade students to how to access our school databases. And because they're in 3rd grade and they're new to using laptops this year, I have to think about, like, all the steps that lead up to actually accessing the database itself and how to teach them how to use it. Actually, as 3rd graders, they need a ton of support with, all those steps, those preceding steps before they actually get to the thing that is the thing I need to teach. But I guess it's recognizing that it's all of those things. I'm teaching those skills that I'm kind of assisting, teaching technological literacy. I'm teaching digital literacy in those moments, in addition to the lesson that I have in my agenda for that day. So, yeah, it's a lot. I think some librarians work specific with high school students, some with middle, some with elementary, some across those grade levels. But the bottom line is it's that structure or support, so that students do have those skills when they do go out and have kind of free reign, whether that's at home or when they're a little bit older.
There's almost, I guess, that transition over time from a guide to a reference. Right? Mm-hmm. And part of that guidance is having those students understand when they should seek a reference, what they should be seeking it for, when you are out doing independent learning, whatever that means. That could mean during your school age years. It could mean when you're 65 years old, you're going out and you're information seeking and information gathering and trying to draw. But you want to know, okay, I have a good base here, and now I need to go to an expert or an expert source. And it's the expectation and, in fact, the necessity in almost every area of life, especially now with the amount of information that's out there, how rapidly our knowledge base as a society is growing. It really is to use the medical field as an example. There's so many things constantly happening with the research and in medical journals, and so many things that doctors are constantly becoming aware of, that they want the patient to do a little bit of research before they come in, to have a sense of, oh, I've been having these symptoms or these issues, and it seems consistent with this, or that. It actually helps them to say, let me narrow that down a little bit and see if I agree, right? you still need to go there and actually get diagnosed by an actual expert, and you
Yeah.
may be on the right track, you may be completely wrong.
Yeah.
But you
Totally.
also know that you're helping them, because if they're starting from complete scratch, it could take too long to come to the right answer. And these things, are urgent, or it could, take a while to narrow things down. Or anybody, I'm sure, who's ever, had a circumstance where they, needed to pay a lawyer for legal expertise, knows doing some legwork on the front end to really understand what you're trying to learn is helpful. Because if they're starting
Yeah.
from nowhere, it's going to take a lot of time. And but you still need to go to them, because you don't know, you don't really understand. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. I also think of things in terms of the meta curriculum, which is a concept I actually came across while researching for the book. So like there are certain skills that are important kind of across grade levels, across subject areas. And in terms of, helping students navigate the internet in various ways, like this idea of being critical of pretty much everything you come across comes up again and again. Like, who wrote this? What's their history? What website is this on? When was this published? Do they reference other sources in whatever you're reading? And that kind of thing. Like those questions, this, no matter what the lesson is, those kinds of critical thinking questions come up again and again, and are going to help them not just in the library class, that I'm teaching them, but also in all sorts of other classes and real world situations.
The other piece that we were kind of just referring to when talking about this is the various facets of literacy, the multiple literacies. And I know you write about this as well. And, I'm sure a good number of our listeners have at least an introductory knowledge to the multiple literacies. But I'm wondering your thoughts on, from you, like, which are the critical literacies to the 21st century school? And, further, are there particular facets that you think are, those unique opportunities for the librarian to be a valuable resource in fostering a well-rounded approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I say this in the book too, but I think there's a lot of overlap in some of the literacies that are mentioned. They sometimes are referred to by different names, like information and news literacy. Sometimes they're different things. Sometimes they're synonymous. But I write about visual literacy, information literacy, digital, technological, racial literacy, and textual. Those are the ones that I focus in the book on as what I see as, or at least in my work and in my conversations with colleagues in the field, as being places where librarians are particularly equipped to help and to teach. And so, yeah, those are the places where I think we've zeroed in on in schools, K through 12 schools.
All right, so a few more questions, kind of as we're sort of getting to the end here, but
yeah,
and these are going to be kind of I think big and broad, but I'm sure you can come up with some compelling ideas here. But I wonder, like, what's the biggest challenge facing school librarians today? I mean, you're involved in so many different aspects of what's going on in schools. The role has evolved a lot over the decades, and so you're not only, I think, a hub for innovation, but a hub for a lot of other, an intersection of many different things that are happening within the school, where you have the opportunity to support and influence and guide, which is excellent and also challenging. So, is there a primary challenge that you find the profession to really be faced with?
Sure. Well, I'll preface my answer with this. I work at an independent school where I have great support and great funding. That's to say, the biggest problem facing school librarians is that they're underfunded and undersupported. And I think that's because in a lot of places, school librarianship is misunderstood. And so again, that was kind of the impetus for the book. Connecting with other school librarians on Twitter, being in conversations in librarian groups on Facebook, it's such a serious problem. I mean, positions are still being cut, and school librarians throughout the country don't have budgets for books and are constantly having to write grants and seek out donations and rely almost exclusively on parent volunteers to help do, kind of simple but essential tasks like reshelving the books and covering the books and getting them ready to catalog and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, that's the problem. I mean, I don't think a lot of folks in K through 12 education somehow in the year 2021, I think there's still a really problematic misunderstanding, but also just general underappreciation of what school librarians bring to the table for schools. So it's a problem. It makes me feel frustrated. It makes me feel angry that this is still happening. But then you see things in the news like books being banned, books being burned, and you kind of get a sense that there, in some places, there's just not a real love for books and for democratizing education, and it's sad. And so I think, yeah, that's the problem. It's a problem for a lot of us. And so I think we just have to do what we can to advocate. I consider this book a form of advocacy. I think there's a lot of mutual support and social media, which is great. But when you see school librarians and even classroom teachers, at the beginning of each school year, posting requests for book donations and asking kind of strangers to fund their classroom or school library, then I think, that the problem there is self-evident.
Right. Funding is the answer to so many gaps and the solution that overrides everything. And I can also, it's evident that when funding is short to the extent that it's not even really supporting the most routine of tasks and roles of the library, certainly the funding that would be required to the level to support the real innovation and doing something new, then you're even further away from that, right?
Yeah.
Because the baseline objectives are not always covered, and a lot of that largely because of a lack of consensus on the role of what this librarian is doing, what the library is there for, what are our objectives around it. As a librarian, I have one clear understanding of what I'm supposed to be doing here, but somebody else somewhere that's making these decisions has something else in mind. And, ultimately, okay, it's that, the opportunity cost can end up becoming far greater than the budgetary cost, the incremental, increase the budget, because there's all these things that when we talk about, do all of the teachers and administrators, does everybody know about the opportunities that are there to partner with the library, to leverage it, and all these things? And, in certain cases where that understanding is narrowed down to the point where the library is unable to really even achieve those things, then we don't know what the opportunity cost is, because who knows? There could be so much there. And of course, I'm sure that, whether from your own experience and certainly from the folks you've spoken to, we see some of these shining examples of, this is what it really looks like. This is what we could be achieving all over the place.
Exactly.
And, right. And even, and the function within, it is interesting to think about, right? The function of the school library within the school, it can mirror what public libraries do in the community. I mean, it's everybody, it's available to everybody. Anybody can go there, they can learn, they can access information, they can get some help finding that info. And, as we understand the way that students learn and how different students succeed in the classroom, or the ways in which certain students are struggling in the classroom, there may be some for whom that library is more than just a supplement. It really is a primary source of where they feel like they're able to really learn the things that interest them and engage them.
It's a place where they can feel like they're seen too, because I feel like one of the things that just in terms of textual literacy in books, we are constantly updating our collections to the best of our abilities, and most school librarians are quite in the know about new books. And so when we add to our collections, which again is a kind of a continuous process for most of us as we're able, we bring in new voices. These publishing is slowly becoming more diverse. We're able to bring more diverse books into our school libraries, and then we're able to recommend them to teachers and to students. And so we play that really critical role of being a community space where people can come in, but we also, by including books that are representative of our student populations as much as possible, we were able to kind of show students specifically that that they're seen, and that and when students see themselves in stories in one form or another, or some aspect of their identity is seen in stories that we're introducing them to, or we're introducing their teachers to, and the teachers introducing them to those stories, I think the value of that speaks for itself.
So this last question as we wrap up, I think it's very aligned to it could be very aligned to the funding piece, because it could be sort of that appeal for, hey, did you know, we can really be a resource in this way if we're thought of as such and supported as such, so it can be both around, I think, the resources and the utilization. To basically, if there's is there one thing that stands out to you as something that you believe is like a real strength of the school librarians, right? And a real value that you bring to the schools that is frequently not known, not understood, overlooked, that you would really want to communicate to those teachers and administrators and say, this is what we do, right? We can really do great stuff here. Did you know that? And I think part of that could be in those cases where it's there's hard decisions and challenges that are persistent in every school and school district. So sometimes it could be the things that everybody's walking around that are weighing on them, and they're saying, I wish we could do this. And they just don't know, hey, this is who can help you with that. And there's other occasions where, maybe you are doing this and just not everybody realizes it. Is there anything in particular that really stands out in that regard?
Yeah, I think so. It's hard to pick one. But I would say the last one I write about in the book, in chapter 7, is collaboration, like modeling and teaching collaboration. And I would say that's crucial because it's asked about in so many job interviews. It's an expectation in a lot of employers that young people come into their jobs with solid collaboration skills. And I feel like we just haven't really, generally speaking, in K through 12 education, cracked the code for how to do that effectively, to teach collaboration skills, despite them being so important. And so it's such a clear, you hear that word all the time, and not a lot of adults are great at it. So I think I know school librarians, most of us are expert collaborators by the nature of our work. And so we can model for students how to do it, but also a lot of the projects that we're teaching explicitly teach it. So I think that combination of modeling and teaching collaboration is one of the kind of overlooked or just misunderstood areas of school librarianship right now. And so if more teachers and administrators specifically understood that this is something that we're really good at and we know how to teach, I think that can make a huge difference for schools, kind of at the ground level, and then it's kind of spreading out from there.
That's a great closing thought there. And yeah, collaboration really is the key word that should be present everywhere in education, right? It really is. It's a collaborative community approach to delivering the best education to kids, and it's, I think, very comforting and empowering to all the educators working in these schools to know that those collaborators are there, that those opportunities exist, that we're not all just working in isolation, that we are kind of doing this together. So I think that's a wonderful place to end. And so, I mean, thank you so much, Ryan. I really appreciate you sharing these ideas. A lot of this, are things we haven't had opportunities to speak about recently on the show here, but I think it's super valuable to all of our listeners.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to talk.
Listeners, make sure that you learn more about Ryan's book, 21st Century School Library. In the show notes, we'll also have reflection questions for the interview. We'll have links to where you can find the book and a lot more.